Well, good morning, fellas. Coming to you from deep within the 7th Street Fix and Flip. We are a few days from selling this thing, closing on it. So that's a good thing. It's better than not closing on a Fix and Flip. So anyway, we are Sunday morning early, and we are in 2nd Peter or 1st Peter chapter 2. I'm a little bit upset with Caleb because we're doing one chapter a week on this thing, and this chapter is like a crescendo chapter in the entire New Testament. Might be one of my favorite passages, and it needs like a year. But we're going to do it in a day, in a little 10 minutes here, so let's just fire away. This last, right before chapter 2, Peter had basically mentioned that they were born again. So remember that idea that our spiritual rebirth or our following Jesus is as if we literally were born again at every level. So Jesus is making a new man out of us. So Paul will oftentimes reference the old man. And then there's always a reference back to kind of the new life that's available to us because of our spiritual rebirth. And so then in chapter 2, verse 1, he says, "Therefore rid yourself of all malice and deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander." Rid yourself. So now that you've been born again, you don't need to do these things anymore. Don't view these things as like hey, you really suck if you struggle on these. These are normal things that everybody does. I remember a guy taught me one time when he said, when people are struggling with things in their life, maybe, say to them, look, I don't suffer that anymore. And the idea is like if somebody said, like, it's getting very cumbersome to get my family into the minivan and get them to church. Or they might say, I'm just, it's just hard not to cheat on my taxes, whatever it is, or whatever. I just go, yeah, I don't suffer that anymore. And the idea is that I'm not bothered by that anymore. Like, I'm not going to let these things steal my freedom. And so he's saying, now you've been born again, don't suffer envy. Like, don't waste your time looking at what other guys have and going, I wish I had one of those. For sure, don't covet or envy somebody's wife or things or money or possessions or job description or title. Just do not suffer those things anymore. So rid yourself of malice. Malice is kind of an angry envy. Like if somebody has something you want, you just judge them. And then eventually move to slander. Hypocrisy is like, hey, don't suffer those aspects of your life that deep down are causing you to be fraudulent. Fraudulent is when you, on the outside, you put off some sort of a persona, but deep down that's not really you. When you're hypocritical, it doesn't really hurt other people, but it does whittle away your own sense of identity of who you are as a man. And so don't suffer it anymore. Just be real, be yourself. When you're struggling, tell guys you're struggling. And then when you're doing well, you're doing well. So deceit, obviously, is don't suffer. Deceit would be things that we do, again, to hide like our real life. There's nothing more tiring than trying to cover your tracks. If you think about that, so many men live with kind of like a double life in some area of their life. And if you've ever been involved in that, you recognize that you go, look, it's just a matter of time before somebody figures this out. But that is a heavy weight to carry. And so everything that Jesus says, like, you've been born again, so now no longer, like, just rid yourself of this stuff. He's always asking you to consider a freer life. He's never doing it to just beat you into submission. He's literally going, don't suffer these things anymore, guys. Can you imagine the type of freedom you would have if you never worried about deceiving anybody, if you never worried about what other people had, if you never had to put on a show and try to act like you're something that you're not, if you never envied anybody else's stuff? Can you imagine how free you would be? And so this is what Jesus is on about. Then he says, like newborn babes, crave pure spiritual milk, so that in it you may grow up. He's playing off this idea, you're brand new born again, so now get on to the feeding, like start getting some pure milk. He's obviously talking about time in the Word and time in community. It's not just the Word, but time in community. And my daughter just got a new foster grandson. He's about 1.5 years old. His name is Riker. And his father and mother are stuck in the meth thing. His father's going to be in jail for about 30 years. And I told my daughter, we can't adopt this kid because I just can't imagine having a kid named Riker in my family. But be that as it may, whatever the Lord wants. But Riker, when we brought him home, we were just giving him normal food, like that a 1.5-year-old would eat. And we realized he didn't know how to chew. He would put it in his mouth, and his eyes would light up because he was so excited about the flavor. He had only been basically given, whatever they call that, baby solution stuff. He had literally never had real food, and his eyes just lit up. And almost anything we give him, he'll just sit there and leave it in his mouth and just smile with it, almost like he's got a bone in his mouth. And we'll have to say, Riker, chew it. And as he chews it, he's so happy all the time. This is the idea that, many of you remember what you felt like when you first came to faith, when you first were born again, and everything was so exciting. Everything you read was amazing. And as we get older, we forget how good pure food is. So guys, stay in the Word. He says, then there's like a litany of like identity issues. Like, again, now that you're born again, you're going to start changing from the inside. A lot of the ways you used to act, deceiving, slandering, like that stuff starts to go away. And now he's starting to remind you of your new identity. And he says, as you've come to him, the living stone, rejected by men, but chosen by God. That's a great extra credit stopper right there, because that should always be your framework. Rejected by men, but accepted and chosen by God. He's basically going, you're always going to be better if you stay with the mindset of like, I am God, so it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about me. I'm not going to work for the acclaim of men anymore, because if my dad's chosen me, like that's all I need right now. It says you also are like living stones. So he's beginning to build our identity. You're now like living stones, and you're being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So you're being built into a community, into his house. And the house is a picture of the early temple. Remember when we were going through Samuel, how God said, like, I don't really need a place. As the kings came on, people were like, well, build us a temple. So God's like, whatever, build him a temple. But he said, I never live in these temples made with human hands. He was foreshadowing that someday, because of what Jesus would do, a entity called his church would form, and the church would be the new spiritual building that God would build. But it's not brick and mortar. It's made with the hearts and the souls of men and women. And so he's now saying your new identity is my church, my people. And so you're going to be a temple as you get built together, as you grow and mature, guys. You are a part of a bigger community, and you're a part of a historical community. And so nothing is going to be personal anymore. You forget this idea of personal relationship with God. It's always meant to be a communal relationship, because you cannot walk with God by yourself, and God doesn't walk with you by just you two. He's building this huge living temple, walking temple, if you will, almost like the Old Testament tabernacle where they have no place, so they're a wandering tabernacle. That's a better picture of what we are. And specifically then he says, this tabernacle, you don't just have one priest anymore. You're actually going to be a part of the priesthood. This is now the first time where your identity is not like you're a man that goes to church. It's that you're a man that is a part of God's church, and all of y'all are my priests, okay? Sure, there are now leaders in God's church, but the priesthood, the idea of offering sacrifices and interceding to God on behalf of men, doing the works of ministry, all the things that like the one single priest used to do, it's now given to all of us. And that's a huge identity piece. A lot of men will put their faith in Jesus, but it takes a while for that same man to actually believe that they're called of God, and that in some fashion or framework, God is going to ask them to be a priest. And so you're clergy, guys. Okay, you're clergy. So then he says, after we're a building that's being built together, he does remind us Jesus is the cornerstone, right? So that's that, obviously cornerstone, then you start building bricks upon that. So he's just trying to make sure you realize Jesus is now in this family with you, and we're building everything on him. Then talks about people that won't believe this, and he shows this will be a stumbling block to them, but for you, it won't be. You'll understand what God's doing. And then he goes on to identity, number 3, verse 9. But you are also a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Bam. Chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and you belong to him, so that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into light. And so, guys, you start to get the picture that your life is now a very meaningful endeavor because you're a part of a huge story where God is remaking the world through us. Okay, that's your identity now. You're not just a dude out in the wilderness. You've been brought in. You've been chosen. I just think it's an amazing passage. I think it takes your whole life to grow into your actual belief in this. And so then he goes into a passage, and starting in verse 12 all the way through, where he's talking about how you relate to the government and to people, even your slave owner, because probably 2/3 of all the men at this time had a slave owner. They're working off their debt or whatever. And so he starts to go like, no matter the situation that you found yourself in when you came to faith, do the very best with what you're given. Even if you're technically a slave, he's going like, treat your slave master differently than you used to. And if you're under a government system or a certain political leader, you may not like him, but he's actually going, it matters how you live in whatever circumstance you find yourself in. Whether it's a lousy marriage, a third marriage, whether or not you're under an unruly partner in your business, you just can't stand the guy, whatever it is. Now you've been living next to these neighbors that you've been kind of, wanting to give them the middle finger over the fence. No matter what undesirable situation you find yourself in, because of your new identity as God's chosen people representing him on earth in every single situation, take a look at that and start behaving under the reign of Jesus. And he basically is talking about, it says here, live as free men, but do not use your freedom as a cover for evil. Okay, so you're free. Don't suffer yourself all these other concerns that you used to have before you were born again. But take advantage of every situation God given you, because it's really about being a witness for him now instead of getting what you want. Okay, so everything is about the witness of Jesus around you. When they see you loving them, when they know they've been a real turkey bird to you, it's a witness to them. And where you maybe have been rude to those neighbors for years, all of a sudden they see you making an invite over to a barbecue and you just start to make amends. It's a way of witnessing, okay? And when you've been in partnership with some other guys and you've been, deceiving people with your business practices or on your taxes, now they see you actually going, look, I can't do that anymore. It's a witness, all right? So take all that stuff seriously. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the brotherhood, the believers, fear God, and honor the king. And even if you don't like the king, honor the king. Why? Because people know you don't like him. You don't agree with his policies, but you don't speak slanderously, and you don't, you're different. And that's what's unique about a Christian man. We're not better, but we can be different. And in our difference, we are witnesses of Jesus under this new identity. So, guys, I would say keep reading this entire chapter like every single day. It's so rich. You will find your purpose in life. You will find your sense of meaning. You will find your identity. You will be called away from all those things you used to suffer from, to just give them up and be free. And so, man, I love this. I wish we could keep going, but have a great week, and we'll see you.